Hello.
Hi, welcome. Welcome.
A new background.
Yeah. Hi, Kathleen.
And David, I'm joining.
Oh, hey, David.
Hi, Rami. Can you see me okay?
We can't see you yet. I'm asking, I just sent you a request to turn on the video. Great. Beautiful.
Any better?
Yep, we got you.
There's somebody else I know.
Yeah. Great. Thank you, everyone, for being on time. I see people are just joining now. Hi, Genjo.
Hello.
Great. Let's see that everybody's mics. We can hear everyone. Anita, can you hear and see us?
Hi. Good morning.
Great.
Good morning, everyone. Or afternoon.
Or evening. Hi, George. Can you see and hear us?
Wonderful. Thank you for your patience.
Sure. Great. So thank you, everyone, for being on time. I see people are still joining. So may I suggest we maybe just take a moment of silence? We can just ground ourselves a little bit before we begin and let people join in the meantime. What I'll do is I'll just mute us as we do that, and I'll continue again in a couple of minutes. Thank you, everyone, for joining. We have a real international gathering here today. I'm also really glad I think I know everyone. We've all connected in one way or another, whether on retreats or on other calls. Usually I give a bit of an introduction of just what these meetings are. Many of you have already worked with us or participated in Zen Peacemakers events, so you know about Zen Peacemakers, our mission, our Three Tenets, Bernie's legacy to us, our wish to engage the world with a compassion that is informed with heart and with creativity and freshness. And one way that we wanted to spread that message out is to be able to engage our membership all over the world in through different themes or different callings and different ways that we feel called to serve. And one of these was the climate disruption that's been at the forefront of so many of our news, but also our attention and heart, and it also precipitates so much of the other challenges that the world sees right now. So I thought it was a great idea to just bring people together and just connect. This is really the first intention of these meetings. We have these every month. We have at least one, sometimes two. The first intention of these is, first of all, to connect. And this is the basis of this new radical way of action that is the Zen Peacemakers are trying to promote. It's an action that is based on connection, and this is one way of doing that. And beyond that, we don't know. We don't know what may come out of this, whether it will provoke other ideas in the future, other ways to activate ourselves. And so each one of these meetings start this way. We'll have a lot of open space for sharing. We're not going to do it in a formal council. Oftentimes we use council practice in these meetings. What we'll use is a bit of a modified form of that, where because we have a lot of people joining, I'll just keep everybody muted. And if you want to speak, you can just raise your hand and I'll call on you. And we just invite people to just speak from the heart, listen from the heart, and really pay attention to the people who are speaking. And you don't need to rehearse what you want to say. And if you feel like you were called to speak, just raise your hand. We are recording this call because there's been so much interest in this subject, and I would love to be able to share it with other members later on. So if you're okay with that, by staying on the call, that's a sign of your consent. So thank you so much. And we'll have about 90 minutes, and in a minute I'll ask us to maybe go back into that silence, and I'll do just a little bit of an invocation to kind of bring to heart and mind the earth that gives life to us and gives life to this, and that we feel called to protect. And we'll do a little bit of a quick round of just hearing from each one of us just where we're from, and just a bit of your name. And then we'll start the conversation. And we have a few individuals here who are doing are at the forefront of work with climate, and I will call on some of you to speak on that, and then we'll just open it up to for everybody to share. So Carolina, welcome. It's fine if I cannot see your video. If you want to stay without video, that's completely fine. I'm going to send you a request to start the video if you'd like. Otherwise, feel free to stay with your camera off. So let's take again a minute just to settle. Can bring to mind this blue pearl floating in space, and we're all specks, living specks on it, with so many others from different parts of the world. Even in this call, there's so many countries represented. Even that gravity that pulls me to the chair right now it's a way of it's relating to me. Here's a poem by poet Linda France. It's called Dreaming the Real. I'm lying down, looking at the color of sky falling through trees, dreaming the real, tasting what it feels like to love it. Why did it take me so long to let go? Simply exhale, so the day could breathe itself in and open without me standing in the way. How could I forget the grace of my own body, strong as this blue, tender as the white of the wild blossom, warm as midday light? Let me practice a patience bold enough to hold every weather, trusting the elements, the beauty of the rain, all its shades of gray. I want whatever's real to be enough. At least it's a place to begin, and to master the art of loving it. Feel it love me back under my skin. Mm. Mm. So let's just begin with a quick round of just hearing each other's voice cast into this gathering. Raise your hand if you'd like to introduce yourself. Just say your name, where you're calling from, maybe a few words, and we'll continue from there. Yeah. And David, we'll obviously hear from you, and then we'll return for you because you'll be one of the speakers. I'd love you to speak. Yeah. Go ahead, David.
Okay, yes. So David Loy calling in from Boulder, Colorado, where we have very recently founded a new Rocky Mountain Eco-Dharma Retreat Center. So I hope there will be an opportunity to talk a little bit more about that later on.
Mm. Great. Thanks, David. George, go ahead.
Thank you, Rami. I'm thrilled that David Loy is here and to meet him. I'm thrilled about everyone who is here today. I'm calling in from Phoenix, Arizona. And I think my story is briefly that 40 years ago, when I graduated with a degree in chemistry, that winter, the hole in the ozone was reported over the Antarctic. So I've been very interested since then. Thank you.
Thanks, George. Yeah, Anita.
I'm Anita Klein. I'm in San Francisco. I sent out something yesterday. I don't know if people had a chance to look at it, but I'm currently involved with a teacher, Tanisra, to put out a document to the world. Inspired, Tanisra's from the UK. The document is inspired in large part by Extinction Rebellion and the need to wake up to the fact that there's a climate emergency. I have a long history of activism, but I really have got inspired to be an eco-activist at the time of the People's Climate March several years ago. And I was thinking this morning, I have a picture that I so treasure of David and I think Bhikkhu Bodhi, arm in arm, and maybe some other teachers on that march, which turned my attention toward the power of movement and the interfaith contingent was huge, much bigger than they expected. They had to move us to another space. And that made me understand that my Buddhist practice could incorporate this engagement around, especially around climate. So I appreciate that. Sorry to go on for so long.
Great, thanks, Anita. Kathleen, go ahead.
I'm Kathleen. I'm calling from Bonn in Germany, from the old continent. You might know. I'll share it with Nico this time again in this meeting. Yeah, I'm practicing with the Zen Peacemakers since about 2011, and I'm kind of a barefoot eco and peace activist, and connected to the Transition Town movement also. Yeah, that's enough for check-in. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Kathleen. Genjo.
So my name is Genjo Marinello, and I'm calling from Seattle, Washington. My Zen group, I'm the abbot of a Zen residential practice center here, and we converted an apartment building where we live together. There are residents plus people come around the region for week-long sessions. Last year, I worked with my board to get solar panels up on top of our roof, and feel good that we've been generating power into the grid for the last year. I've also been supporting and working with our governor through something called the Faith Action Network here, Governor Jay Inslee, who is running for president, who isn't, but his principal platform is that we're in a climate emergency, and I like that he sees that as the #1 issue.
All right, thanks, Genjo. Grant. We can't hear you, but you're unmuted.
Now?
Okay, now better. Yeah.
Maybe I'll put, I'll get, do someone else and I'll get earphones and then I'll have a better speaker.
Okay. I'm calling from Israel. I came here a few days ago to participate in the elections. It's been a very dramatic elections, very reminiscent of 2016 in the United States, with not so different results. It's beautiful. I'm struck by how beautiful it is here. The sky, the blues, the birds. Usually I'm from New York or Massachusetts, and there's it's a different terrain, so the earth is very present for me this past week. Yeah. Grant, you good?
Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, very good.
Okay. So Grant Couch, Boulder, Colorado, and been working actively with Zen Peacemakers and Bernie before he died for, I guess, 9 years now. And climate's my mission. And I'm working with a group called Citizens Climate Lobby, which has called me to walk the Hill in DC several times a year and to meet around the country with different people on the political side. So that's as Bernie liked to suggest plunges. So I'm doing the political plunge.
Great, thanks so much, Grant. And I'll ask you to speak a little bit more about your work in a bit. you know, the participation in these calls are voluntary. Obviously, it's really fine to just listen in. If Carolina and Miko, if you want to just put your voice into the mix, you're welcome. It will be wonderful just to hear where you're calling from and kind of what brought you to the call. Also, okay to just sit back and listen. So, if you'd like to, just raise your hand. Okay, yeah, Carolina, please.
Carolina, I'm calling from the Dominican Republic. We have very small Zen community here. It's about 5.
Carolina, I think your connection froze. Has it frozen on everybody else's? Yeah. So, Carolina, we've heard you up to that you're a small community. Perhaps if you either want to just keep listening, or maybe you'd like to leave the room and then come back with the same link, that may reset the connection. Yeah. Let's hear Miko in the meantime.
Hello, I'm Mikko. Yes, I'm calling from Helsinki, Finland, and I'm really pleased to be a member of this group. It's a huge honor. I'm running a small group of people, members of the Zen Peacemakers. We're called the Peacemakers Finland, and all have different teachers. My wife teacher is Roshi Ekioku from CCLA, and my teacher is Frank de Waal from Belgium, and then we have other teachers as well affiliated with that group. And we kind of like hold a small Zendo here in Helsinki, and we try to be kind of like a connective group between different Buddhist groups, but also different religious groups as well. And I'm also a researcher now affiliated with the Harvard University, the Human Evolutionary Biology Department. So because of that, I get quite often to speak about different things. And last week I was at the theology department at Helsinki University. They asked me actually to speak about religion and climate change. And so I had a privilege to speak about eco-dharma and so on. So that was a huge honor. But we're kind of like exploring nowadays ways to be more intimately active on ecological issues as well. Yeah. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Miko. Thanks, everyone. Let's, as we're waiting, if Carolina possibly joins us again. I think Genja used the word crisis, and I know that for me, this is a way that I think of this often, and I hear a lot of people refer to it as that way too. And it's one of the reasons that poem that I read in the beginning really stood out for me, because that poem was somehow asking me for love that is patient, but is also active. And oftentimes when I speak in these meetings with activists in other fields, the quality of patience and love is usually the first thing we throw out, because we are so caring about what we love. I also thought it was an interesting poem because it brought the questions of the real and the dream, and I thought it was an interesting subjects to bring into a conversation with Buddhists or people who practice Buddhism. Oftentimes, again, with on the other side of the activists, where we have the spiritual practitioners in these meetings, sometimes there's a way to kind of disappear behind the dream. Oh, I see Carolina is back. Right. So I would love, hi Carolina, welcome back. Would you like to just say a word?
Okay, I'm very sorry to interrupt.
Hmm.
I was saying I belong to a very small local Zen community, representing them right here. We're all very concerned about what's happening in our planet, and we're striving for hope. And we have been receiving some newsletters inviting us to this meeting. So here I am, saying that I can learn. Thank you.
Wonderful. Welcome, Carolina, from the Dominican Republic. It's great to have you here. So I feel very privileged to have David Loy with us. For those of you who may not be as familiar, David Loy is really at the forefront of both action, scholarly exploration, practice-based practice of climate and Dharma. And he's a teacher in the Sanbokyodan lineage, and goes really around the world to spread the message of the Dharma around the ecology and the planet. And I would love to give David a few minutes, and however you feel would be enough to kind of lay the ground of what you see right now, both in terms of, you know, obviously just the reality of the research and where we're at right now, but also just where do you see as practitioners and as Buddhists and as spiritual practitioners, where do you see the responses? Where do you see the challenges? Because you talk with so many communities and you teach that in so many places around the world. So I think it's a really privileged opportunity to have you here. So thank you. And I'll just pass the mic to you for now.
Well, thank you, Rami, for those very kind words. Can everyone hear me okay? Is the sound good enough? Great, great. Yeah. Well, there's so much to talk about. I'm not sure where to begin. Responding immediately to your last point, it's interesting, and it's something I think we need to take a look at sometime. The fact that I think the Buddhist community in the U.S. and elsewhere has been rather slow to sort of pick up on this issue. I've been quite struck by it. Last year, I scheduled a number of workshops on eco-dharma, and I was also invited as one of the keynote speakers to a big conference in Germany, in Hamburg. And it was interesting. A number of those were canceled or should have been canceled because people didn't sign up. And even the ones that we went to, that happened, it was rather small numbers. And then this big pan-Buddhist conference that was supposed to happen in Hamburg, where the focus was on Buddhism and climate change, or Buddhism and the natural world, only a few people signed up, so very few. They expected many more. So in the end, that was canceled as well. So this is a really interesting question. I think that some of us in the Buddhist world are certainly very engaged by that, and I think interest is growing, but a lot more slowly than I would have expected. Anyway, let me just table that notion as something that we may want to come back to. For me, maybe it's relevant to start out just by saying a few words about what eco-dharma means. I mean, it's really a new concept. As far as I know, the first person to talk about it was Guyapati. And I'm a little disappointed that we don't have a representative from the Eco-Dharma Center in Northeast Spain, which in many ways I think is in the forefront of this. I don't know if people from there are members of Zen Peacemakers, but that's the first Eco-Dharma Center in the world as far as I know, and our little one here in Boulder is a kind of we're inspired by their example, but we certainly don't have the kind of large community and large space that they have. I'm really impressed by the work that they're doing, not only talking to Buddhists, but find ways to talk to activists and helping them ground their practice in something that will make them sort of more effective. Otherwise, as we know, activists so easily tend to get burned out. Maybe I should start by just saying what Ecodharma means for me. As I said, it's such a new term. I think it's something that we're still struggling with. Obviously, it's trying to bring together the Buddhist tradition or traditions, looking at what Buddhism has to contribute that can help us understand and respond to the eco-crisis. But on the other side too, I mean, I think modernity in general and this kind of ecological challenge in particular really raise some important questions about how we understand and practice Buddhism. So I see simply another one of the many ways in which as Buddhism has gone to a new culture, every time it's gone to a new culture like Tibet or China or Japan, what's happened is that it hasn't just imposed itself, but it's really interacted with the local culture. And I think that's a very important part of what's going on now, that this is in some ways the kind of greatest challenge that not only humanity has ever faced, but also Buddhism in terms of, you know, its relevance to our particular situation. Anyway, I'm not sure how much to talk, but let me mention the three aspects of Ecodharma that stand out for me. Again, this is a kind of a moving target, but this is what seems most important to me at the moment. First of all is actually spending time in the natural world. You alluded to what it's like to be in Israel, not only politically, but also just getting in touch with the way nature manifests there. It's really striking when we look at the traditional biographies of the Buddha, just how connected he was with trees, you know, being born outside in Lumbini Grove. When he left home, he went into the forest, he studied in the forest, ascetic practices in the forest, meditated in the forest, enlightened under a tree, apparently next to a little river, mostly taught, lived, died in the forest. And yet most of us spend our time, I mean, everyone here, as far as I can see, right, we're all inside rooms and we tend to meditate in rooms. And obviously this is a lot more convenient, comfortable, you know, weather control, screens and so forth, but we may also wonder if something's lost. And so I think the idea of actually reconnecting with the natural world, especially if we're able to go off by ourselves and sort of leave the social world, the world of language behind, just to ourselves in a different kind of living community. I think that can be a really important grounding and transformative in and of itself. I mean, it's quite striking, not just for the Buddha, but Jesus, what did he do after his baptism? He went off into the desert by himself for 40 days and 40 nights, and Muhammad in his cave, and Milarepa in his cave. I mean, there are so many examples of great sort of spiritual leaders who found this kind of practice in the natural world really essential to their transformation. And it's interesting how much we've lost that today. So that's number one. Number two, of course, is looking at what Buddhist teachings have to offer that can help us understand and respond to not just the climate crisis, urgent as that is, but of course, the climate crisis is really just the tip of a much larger ecological iceberg when you look at everything else that's happening. And can't take our eyes or our attention off climate. We really need to remember what else is going on. The extinction event, for example. E.O. Wilson predicted that by the end of this century, half of all plant and animal species could be extinct, or so weakened they'll soon become extinct. I mean, what does that mean to a tradition that emphasizes, you know, saving all sentient beings? I mean, it's truly remarkable. And then you add to that plastics, all the incredible amounts of toxins in the air and the water and the earth and our bodies. I mean, there's so many other things we can talk about here. So I guess I'm emphasizing that just to say, if we just think about climate, we might think that it's sufficient just to change quickly enough from fossil fuels to renewables. But when you look at the whole of the climate crisis, it really raised questions about the whole meaning and direction of our civilization. Where are we going? What's the point? And something that I think Buddhism is well equipped to help us address. But of course, Buddhism developed in a very different context when there wasn't a climate change or ecological crisis of the sort we have today. So Buddhism doesn't give us specific answers, but I think there's fascinating parallels or extrapolations we can make. One that always stands out for me is the parallels between what Buddhism is saying about our individual sense of self, the fundamental dukkha of duality, feeling that I'm a consciousness somehow in here behind the eyes or inside the ears, and the rest of the world is out there. This is separation, and how much fundamental dukkha is built into that. And I think a really profound and even precise parallel between our collective situation today, insofar as we really feel so separate from the natural world, and we tend to look on the rest of the biosphere as just something for us to exploit for our own comfort, for our own economic growth. That's just one example, but I think that there's a kind of a powerful message there about what Buddhism, how we might look at the Buddhist teachings and sort of see what they may have to offer us today. And then the third aspect of Eco-Dharma that really stands out for me is the Bodhisattva path, or as some of us now say, the Eco-Dharma path, the Eco-Sattva path. And in some ways, I wonder if it's the most important thing that Buddhism might have to offer, in the sense that it points to a certain kind of activism that joins or keeps together the two faces of the Bodhisattva path, right? So the Bodhisattva, they continue to work on their own personal transformation, meditation, whatever, but they also know that whatever equanimity or emptiness might develop as a result of that, that's not sufficient, that one has to be engaged in the world. So they use that grounding, they use the kind of power of one-pointedness, non-duality, whatever you want to call it, and they use that to go out and become engaged with the world. And this is where I think maybe Buddhism has the most relevance, in the sense that it doesn't give us specific ideas about what to do, right? I mean, it evolved in a very different sort of context, cultural, historical, environmental context. But when we look at the Bodhisattva or Eco-Sattva path, what we see is Buddhism has a great deal to say about how to do it. And the one thing that I would emphasize among all of those things is I think Buddhist practice can help us to engage in the world without attachment to results, without attachment to consequences, which is a dangerous thing to say because it's very easy to misunderstand, right? It suggests a kind of casual attitude, which can be reinforced by the Buddhist emphasis on motivation, right? Buddhism has so much to say about, karma is created not just by what we do, but what our motivations, what our intentions are. And so acting without attachment to results can easily be misunderstood as, okay, what's important is my motivation, not whether I achieve anything. But I don't really think that's I don't think that's the real meaning of it. What I would do is emphasize it differently, something along these lines, that given the essential mystery of the world, given that we don't really know what's happening, we don't know what the results of what we do can be, And I'm reminded here, one of my teachers, Robert Aiken, who put it very well when he said, our path isn't about clearing up the mystery, but making the mystery clear, right? So on this path, it's not as though we have this moment of opening or awakening where, now I understand everything about how things are working. In a way, it's just the opposite. It kind of, we open ourselves up to the mystery, a mystery beyond understanding, right? The mystery that Bernie and the Peacemakers talk about, right? Don't know mind. Huh? So within this don't know mind, it means we don't really know what the consequences of our actions will be. We don't really know coming down. But nonetheless, what I think it means is our job is to do the very best we can, not knowing if anything we do makes any difference whatsoever. Responding appropriately as best we can, as best we understand about our situation and what the next step might be. And I think it's the Bodhisattva path that can enable us to do that, because it can, again, ground us in this perspective of the perspective of appreciating the mystery, but also being open and what's the word? I don't know, satisfied, but being one with the mystery, being able to sort of, again, go along with it, and one step at a time, doing what we can. I'm not saying that very well, but hopefully people get some idea of what I'm trying to talk to there. So for me, those are the three things that really stand out about Eco-Dharma. Reconnecting with the natural world, especially with our meditation, especially if we can do it by ourselves. Number two, really looking at the teachings and just trying to figure out, what do they really mean? What do those teachings have to offer that can help us understand our situation today? And then finally, I think this Eco-Sattva path, which is absolutely essential. I mean, I really feel like the earth is calling upon all of us at this particular point in time to do what we can. And if, as I sometimes say, if Buddhists are unable or unwilling to do that, then to be quite honest, I'm not sure Buddhism is what the world needs right now. But of course, I think Buddhism has so much to offer. In a way, I'm saying that in response to our tendency to sit on the cushions and think that that's practice, and that getting engaged in the world is somehow a distraction from practice. We've really got to get beyond that. We've really got to see that those are the two aspects of practice. And in some ways, the greater challenge, the more difficult one, is integrating whatever transformations may happen on our cushion with how we actually live in the world, relate to other people, and relate to the natural world. And I mean, I think that's the kind of growing tip for Buddhism today that challenges all of us. Did that make any sense?
Thank you, David. Yeah, wonderful, very rich. I'm already taking notes and things that I would love to circle back. Before I do that, I would love to hear from others too. So, and I would maybe just say, I don't think I've said it in the beginning, is that, I was saying that one of the functions and intentions of these meetings is the connection between us. And I think you did something, David, that was really important that I didn't say, where you spoke to our calling, less about what we are going to do and more about how we relate to the cause and the calling. And this is really one of the intentions for these meetings. They're not intended in terms of strategy making. I bet all of us have a lot of things that we're involved in, and we can probably share a lot about that. But in these meetings, or particularly in the beginning of this call, I would really invite you to follow the conversation through how is this responding to your calling, and how is this grounding you as you will leave this meeting further on. So just kind of like refining a bit the intention of the conversation. So next, I would love to call on Grant. Grant mentioned a little bit about what he's doing, being active in the political world. He's also a Zen teacher and a successor of Bernie. So I would love to hear, Grant, both of what you're doing, but also how you weave that into your practice, your teaching, how you see those come together, how when you talk with other sanghas. I know you do presentations with other communities. So I would love to hear from you.
Thanks, Rami, and for that, and for calling this together. And I also want to add that David Loy, I'm blessed to have as one of my teachers too. So, and I woke up on David's last point about so much of the view of Buddhist practice is sitting on the cushion. And one of the things that I really, really appreciated in spending time with Bernie was, for Bernie, there was no differentiation. The rakusu he gave me when they gave me transmission on the back, I'm not going to tell you everything is said because it's not really necessarily relevant. Well, maybe I will, since I've done it that way. But Zen is life. Zen is life. Life is Zen. So there's, for him, I mean, the takeaway for me is that Buddhism isn't separate. I mean, the Dharma isn't separate. Then he added at the end, what the fuck is this? So I'm not sure that's a typical rakusu, but Zen is life. Life is Zen. And I have a background in Wall Street, so numbers and risk management and that type of thing is that's what I know in the sense of, in that bag of tricks that you talk about. We have this knowledge, these tools and these things we've learned, but that doesn't mean that we know what's happening in this moment. But those are the tools one can bring to bear once you really bear witness to what's happening when you want to take action. And in our world, as I speak of our Dharma world, there are many folks that most folks don't have the kind of background I do. So it's a blessing that I was able to bring that to the political world and be able to put on a nice fancy Italian suit and silk tie and walk the halls of Congress like any other lobbyist, so that there's not a anxiety in the office that there's some wacko coming in to talk about climate. And I found it's been quite a journey for me for about 6 years, because I only decided to get really deep involved after I stopped full-time work and decided what I wanted to do with the rest of my life, and decided climate was it. And for me, it is head and shoulders above every other issue that we as citizens in countries around the world fight and argue over. It shouldn't be divisive. There's no reason for us to have different views about this. It's very understandable that we have different views on abortion, on immigration, on taxes, on welfare, on food stamps. I mean, whatever those, you can have disagreements on that. But this existential risk, I don't think there's any basis for that other than the tribal dogma that has been developed by both sides. Right? So I'm imagining that most people think it's all the Republicans' fault. And I imagine that if I told you that I was a Republican, that you would have a sort of knee-jerk aversion inside, I'm other. But if I was a Democrat and I was walking on the right side of the aisle, you'd go, okay, that must be tough, or wow, how did he deal with that? So these are all judgments that each of us on this call, I'll bet, have. And I think that's the real lesson for me in this plunge, is to try to really own my own separateness when I look at politics and the other that I want to create, that separates me from really understanding and accepting the oneness that this is. And it's the challenge is recognizing and working with the nature of the humans that we are. And when I first started getting involved, I saw that the solution that Citizens Climate Lobby was advocating for, which is a revenue neutral price on carbon. So yes, the price of energy goes up as we put a price on embed CO2 in each one of our fossil fuels or carbon-based fuels, as some people prefer to call it. But all of that money goes back to American households. The third part is there's a tariff adjustment, a border adjustment, so that we don't export jobs and greenhouse gases. It seems pretty simple. To me, it was. It was a market-based. It doesn't require regulations. And most importantly, it allowed us to advocate on the right side of the aisle for a solution that hopefully we could get Republicans behind. But what I'm learning, and we watched the yellow vests in France in terms of raising prices on gas. And there was a recent piece, I think it was in the New York Times Magazine section, talking about the challenges of getting people to get on board. Is we have to find a way that they're happy with the goal, not necessarily trying to overcome the challenges of the policy. The goal is most people want to see clean energy. They don't like having higher prices, but they want to see clean energy. So there's almost a perverted sense of the solution is the regulation that says we're going to have clean energy. And I'm coming around to just, again, not knowing what the right answer is. I'll keep plugging away, but it's a journey. And I think to David's point about, and I agree with him 100%, that, and I really felt the ecological crisis before I felt the climate crisis, in terms of the limited resource that this rock that floats in space provides those of us that are living off of it is not something we can continue to exploit as we have. And then throw stuff away because there is no way. How do we manifest ourselves in a way that recognizes our oneness with that big challenge? I think the larger question, David, for me is one that whatever spiritual traditions are need to allow people to understand the virtuous way to walk and one to recognize the oneness. But the immediate issue, this crisis, and I agree with the term crisis of climate, I think I'm not sure that any spiritual tradition can help us address this quickly enough. And one of the things I would counsel folks on in my work with, again, the right side of the aisle, I'm not a Republican, by the way, I'm a lifelong independent, but I am a conservative, is that hysterical hair on fire approaches to things turn people off and the conversation's over. The other thing I would say that's so unfortunate is, and I'm not sure that, I don't know whether each of you see climate as the one issue that is most important. But many people on the left, if I might refer to that, see it as one of many issues and conflate them. And when it's done that way, the folks on the right, which have believed in many cases that the left is merely using climate as a way to get government to be bigger, feel justified in that view, feel justified to keep up the, well, I know what you really want to do, tribal protection, and we don't get anywhere. So I'm trying to find a way and trying to help the progressive people in the Citizens Climate Lobby. We're now 120,000 people, 80% of which self-identify as progressive and liberal. And they all bring their own worldview to life. And we try to teach people to be nonpartisan in their communication, which is difficult for folks. And that's the biggest challenge, is to have a conversation without hitting triggers for the other side that get them to shut down their listening. So that's important. But this is my practice, and I continue to learn every day. And we all of us are able to have success in shifting the political conversation, because I really believe we need a national political solution, and it has to be bipartisan. If it's not bipartisan, then it's going to be something that will be rejected by one half of the country, or 47%, or whatever the number wants to be. And we won't have everybody behind it, and people will be trying to fight it. We need to get together on this, and we need to find a communication that allows climate to be a political bridge, not a political wedge. And so much, unfortunately, on the left uses it as a wedge. On the right, they put up the defenses, they don't listen. It is shifting, though. And I do think the Green New Deal, for being in the eyes of the right, so radical and crazy and proving what the left really wants that they can come out of the corner in which they've painted themselves. They come up with solutions that might move this forward. So we, fortunately, when you look at conversation, pieces and things from leaders like Cole State Senator Barrasso and House leaders like Upton and Greg Walden in Oregon, who have been opposed to doing anything. They're now saying in public, no longer behind closed doors, which are conversations I've been aware of for years, but it was behind closed doors. But they're now saying in public, an issue, and we need to do something about it. Now, their solutions aren't, I don't think, anywhere near sufficient, but at least we're no longer arguing about whether or not there's an issue. Absent the White House, that's like, I'm going to leave that one alone. Nothing we can do about that for another less than 2 years. Hopefully we can. But anyway, the conversation is now what the solution should be. This is good news. So I keep digging there, but I keep being reminded every week, if not every day, I really don't know what's going on, but I keep plugging. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Grant. I appreciate hearing, both you and David, kind of the big picture, the philosophical, the calling, and then in a way what's holding us back, which is us, right? I would love to open it up. We have about 30 more minutes to hear from everyone. I want to acknowledge Jiko, who joined us from New Zealand. Jiko, welcome. If you want to either chip in, either unmute yourself, or if you put your video on, I could see you raising your hand. This is how we use to ask for the talking rights. I would love to invite Carolina. First of all, again, welcome to our meetings. First time I'm seeing you here, so it's wonderful to have you here. I wonder if if somebody from the Dominican Republic, is part of the world that's been affected. I think she's gone. I was really curious to hear just from her experience what it was like the last 2 years. There's been all the storms from there, so I hope she joins us. Yeah. So let's open it up. I saw George had your hand up. Go ahead.
Well, thank you, Rami. As I'm learning and learning, there's a fountain of information about socially engaged Buddhism. And one of the founders from Thailand is a well-known Sulak Siva-Raksha. He helped found the International Network of Engaged Buddhists. And I wanted to share that his point that I've learned so far is what he's calling the importance of friendliness. So this may well be from or includes metta, but I'm just experiencing at this meeting uplifting as a result of this friendliness. And I think that's important. And then it turns out that Dr. Loy is being very humble because in his book, Eco-Dharma, he discusses the 5 precepts, Thich Nhat Hanh Ortay's 16 or so precepts, so to speak, or bodhisattva precepts, and also the paramitas. So the 3 tenets have a lot of Buddha Dharma behind them. And I wanted to share that. And then I'd like to say briefly that I received Anita Klein's email. So I went to the One Earth Sangha, which took me to the Sacred Mountain Sangha, where we're all able to sign a declaration of climate emergency, or I believe it's declare climate emergency now. And within the Sacred Mountain Sangha, this is my real point, where Grant is working at a federal level, I do my advocacy more at the state, but in this case, at the local level. And the Sacred Mountain Sangha has a link to the climate movement.org. And at the climate movement, they provide all the tools and resources and materials for people to deliver to their city councils. So thank you. Thank you all very much. And I will put a note in the messages with these websites, how they lead from one to another. But this has been a wonderful thing. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Yeah, I look forward to seeing the links that you share with us. Carolina, we saw you dropped off. I was personally very interested to just hear from, if you'd like to share, I don't want to put you on the spot, but just from your part of the world that's been affected so much by just the last few years, the storms have been devastating. If you'd like to share just a little bit from your personal experience, I invite you to speak.
I have to apologize beforehand if the connection falls. There's some power failures right now. Yeah, we have been greatly affected. I'm personally beekeeper, and we have been very firsthand, let's say, we have lost a lot of hives and a lot of biodiversity. And we understand also that a great deal of what is happening to us as beekeepers and the country, the state of general population health, for instance, it all has to do with a destroyed like food production system, and to a larger extent, that is caused by the degradation of our ecosystems, and also there needs to be a change of mind in the sense that greater wealth interests cannot decide the future of greater populations. That is pretty much what we all agree with here at our small community, and we've been trying to participate in different initiatives, like local initiatives. Like right now, I'm participating in a regional recycling effort, but much more needs to be done. There's the issue of plastics, as it was already said. There's the issue of our oceans losing reefs and losing biodiversity. And there's the issue of hurricanes and climate change and whatever it causes to us. Water is becoming an issue as well, and as we now are undergoing a very terrible drought. So yeah, I mean, everywhere you look around, it becomes quite chaotic. But as I said, we're looking for hope and the means to act upon it. We believe we still have time.
Thank you, Carolina. I'm curious about hope, and it could be that others can speak about that too. I'm curious, how do you maintain that over there?
Hope.
Hmm.
I'm resonating with the words you said before. We just have to take steps, and we don't know where they're leading, but on our own personal lifestyle, we're making adjustments. We're really pushing for changes in like plastic, the use of one-time disposables. It's very small steps, very community oriented. Like I'm located in a community of 14,000 people, but anything we do in order to create greater awareness of the urgency of the issues, and just seeing a slight response, like one kid in school that takes the message back home, that for us is hope. We cannot just give up.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Thank you, Carolina. Yeah, I really appreciate your presence here with us. I think you bring a lot just by being here and giving us a little bit of a sense and
Thank you.
and yeah, and I can't imagine, and I can only aspire for a sense of community and courage that your country has been showing. So it's really wonderful to have you here with us.
Thanks.
So we have about 20 minutes. So I would love to just open it up. If people just want to share, or if somebody wants to ask a question to the participants. Because we have about 20 minutes, let's just try to be lean in speech, so whoever wants to speak will have time to put as many more people as we can. What I am very excited about is that it seems like there's a lot of interest, and I would love to continue this beyond this call, and I'll speak about that later. Yeah, Genjo, I saw your hand up.
When it comes to hope, I don't have any. And it's okay. Part of our truth as Buddhists, I think helps actually, is that we understand impermanence. The planet is impermanent. The solar system is impermanent. The galaxy is impermanent. The universe is impermanent. And I'm certainly impermanent. But, I talk about planting my tailbone and planting my tailbone into Mother Earth when I sit in the laboratory of the Zendo. And if I plug myself in, I feel the pain of the trees. I feel the pain of the oceans, and I care. So I want to go outside of my clubhouse, my Zendo, and do something caring, have a caring heart for the trees and the rocks and the planet and the atmosphere and the people and the oceans. And so I don't have any hope that I'm going to save anything or save anyone or save the planet. Billion years from now, which is actually a short astrological time, the planet will be completely uninhabitable no matter what we do. So, but in this billion years, why not enjoy and have a caring, open heart and love the planet and love each other? So I have no agenda to save anyone. I have an agenda to have a caring heart towards the trees and oceans and atmosphere and people and animals. So that's what I wanted to add.
Good. Thanks, Genjo. Miko.
Yeah, I spoke to a theater director today, and what came up was that because I am and my wife and most of our friends are artists, and what came up was that the role of an artist is to shock people, not to entertain, is to shock the hell out of them. And that's one of the strategies that I think many of my thoughts have nowadays, is to spread the word and shock people, but also to do it gently and kindly in a way. And I don't know how to really do that, but yeah, but that's what we've been doing. We're making an album with my wife. I'm playing there, and one of the producers. I'm doing music videos and everything. So it's a public role that we have, and I think it has a lot of potential as well. What really came up to me from David's speech was that I've done some research at the Kalahari with the local Zhuangzi people, the San Bushmen. And last May, when I was last there, I kind of spoke about their relationship with nature. And they said that one of the problems with people is that when they get detached from nature, when they're not connected with the nature, is that they're prone to alcohol and everything like this, which is a huge problem with them. And so they're very keen with that close connection with everything. They know exactly what they're eating and what each animal is eating, and what track is made by what animal. They know it personally, and so it's a very close connection they have with their nature. And it's kind of it's a huge privilege every time to go there to see what's the origins of our species and how they're really trying to maintain that. And it gives a lot of hope, is that we can be gentle and we can have this close connection with the earth. But it's also frustrating to see the changes that they are facing because of farming and climate and everything. So yeah, a privilege to be here and pleasure to see all of you. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Miko. Curious if Kathleen or Anita or the other women in the group would like to share. Anita, please.
Yeah, I'm just reflecting on so much, and I really appreciate so many different voices here today. I think, and I'm trying to think of what hasn't been mentioned. Miko, I really appreciate you bringing up the San community, because I've grown quite, well, I should say that the work that I've been relating to in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, is much more local, and even work with people outside the system, the political system that Grant, talked about. Because I think there's a recognition, that David brings out beautifully in his book, that this is really a spiritual crisis, not just an ecological crisis, but which is reflected in the very systems that we've built, which are really not capable of meeting this crisis. And I think that's why I'm enthusiastic about the possibilities of faith groups, and including, and maybe especially, those who are most grounded in indigenous cultures. And I've been working a lot and have learned so much from the Native Americans in the Bay Area. I've been working with Idle No More and the Buddhist community here. This effort that we're building with Tanisra is really seeing these parallels and working with each other quite beautifully to understand, because there's this basic understanding of oneness that I think we find in the indigenous way of regarding the world, and as well as Buddhism. I guess I'll leave it at that for now. I have some other things to say, but I want to give people a chance to respond. But that's one point I think is important to bring out.
Right. Thank you, Anita. And Anita, if we don't get to hear the rest of what you have to say, please feel free to post it. It'd be great to share it. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. You know, I'm just taking the chance to connect to each of you ecosystems that I can see here in front of me by listening. So there are little roots kind of growing out of my own ecosystem towards you, and it's a way of connecting. And so I'm really actually sitting here for an hour now in the mood of I feel like to decide what you all said, what I'm doing. So if that's of interest, we can get in touch and share about that. And I will tell you. But for me, it's nice to stay on this level of feeling as an ecosystem, connecting to other ecosystems by conversation, by listening. So this is actually all I have to say in this moment. My feet are on the ground, not really outside, and I will go outside after this meeting, definitely. But my feet are bare, and they're on the wooden ground in my room, and they are roots are developing down there in the ground and to the right and to the left towards you. So that's all. Thank you.
Yeah, Grant.
Hope. I think that hope with attachment is a bad thing, but I do have hope without attachment, or I think of it that way. But when we're talking about oneness, I find myself remembering one of Bernie's sort of simple teachings. Oneness, we all have a pretty good sense of oneness when we're talking about the one body of our own body. Like my right hand will, without thinking, hold my left hand if it starts bleeding. It doesn't go, oh, look at me, I'm helping my left hand. It just does it. And I think the thing that I struggle with, but really try to keep in the forefront of my action every day is that impermanent universe that Genzo talks about. Well, yes, it's impermanent, but I am no less or more a part of it than I was yesterday or I will be tomorrow as the same trees. Those trees aren't trees separate from me. That's my goddamn left hand that's bleeding. So I shouldn't think about it as being separate, that I need to do something about it. It's just the oneness. And the challenge for many people is that oneness includes the separated families, immigrants at the Mexican border, but it also includes the flyover country blue-collar people that are deep in opioid crisis, who have lost their jobs and are clueless about what's going on. It includes Republicans. It includes whacked out wingnut Republicans. It includes whacked out wingnut liberals. And I think that's the challenge that we all have, in trying to really hold that and recognize it with love for all. That's I think what is so frustrating for me to see, that folks that come walking into the room, this is the old violent anti-war protests, right? And the violence that happened to prevent violence. It's like, love's the answer. And I try, if I can live with that love of all each moment, and we're all one, with hope unattached, because that's part of the motivation. I hope I can make a difference. I do when I look at it from an analytical perspective. My undergraduate's engineering, so I sort of have a little sense of science. It may be, we probably are past the point where we can do much about it. We're going to suffer. It's going to get worse for some time, particularly if we don't do anything more about it. But you keep plugging, and things will change. And the thing too, just the Native American, one of the things that I really appreciated about my experience with the Native Americans, and I'm so glad we have another full retreat around me this summer, but in Lakota, there is no separate word for nature. It's just a concept that nature's separate. And I like to remember that too. So thank you.
Miko.
Just a quick note to Grant's concept of nature. There was a poll in the EU asking about different countries in the EU to describe a national monument for each country. And like the French, they said the Eiffel Tower and the Big Ben for the people from England and so on. But Finns, they said nature. Nature was the national monument for Finland, and it's a really, really important thing for us. And the close connections the Finns have is a tremendous treasure, really. And we are indigenous people from here, and I did this DNA tests, and my lineage goes back to 12,000 years of Finnish descendants from northern Siberia when we came here after the Ice Age. And I know some of the Sami people who are another group from northern Finland, and we're going to visit them this summer on the northernmost part of the country. So I think it's something that we really should treasure. We have the elections now, and it really shows that people are really closely connected to the environmental issues, and that's one of the biggest themes here in the elections now. So in that sense, I'm really, really hopeful on our country, not for the world, I guess, but yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Miko. We have time for maybe two short ones. David, did I see your hand up?
Well, a couple things. Several people have mentioned hope, and I think from a Buddhist perspective, this has kind of special resonance, which Genjo expressed quite well. I think another way to say it is, often or usually our understanding of hope is kind of dualistic. The other half of it is despair, which literally means, I think, no hope. And the problem with hope is, again, as often understood and felt, is that there's this tendency to kind of bounce from one to the other. We read something positive, we get hopeful. There's something negative comes up, we despair or become pessimistic again. And I think the real challenge of our practice is there a practice and an activism, such as I think Genjo was pointing at, that's beyond hope and despair? Is there the grounding that isn't going to get pushed, that isn't going to be dependent on that alternation between one or the other? If I can follow up in a slightly different way, I think that something really important has just been happening over the last year. I really sense a kind of shift in consciousness that's going on in three ways. Number one, I think that a lot of us are much more aware, a lot more people are more aware that the situation is more difficult than they realized before, and that things are getting worse more quickly. It's not just linear. So there's an increasing sense of that. And the other side of it, I think, and is the sense that many have, that we can't depend on politicians to solve the problem, or at least not without finding ways to really hold their feet to the fire. That is to say, I feel that my sense here is that the fundamental problem with the political system, at least in the United States, is that the people who benefit most from the present economic and political system, and they're just two sides of the same thing. The people who benefit most from the present system are the ones who control the present system. And they do not have the motivation or even, I think, the perception to see how fundamental the problem is and the deep changes that have to happen. They're aware there's a problem. The tendency is to sort of play around the edges in a way that isn't just ever going to get us where we want to go. And so the third point that I think is really, really important is more and more groups are talking about direct action, nonviolent civil disobedience as maybe our best hope at this point, as a way of holding politicians to the fire. And I'm really struck by this, the sense now direct action by itself is only a tactic. It has to work with the thing that Grant is talking about, but that we really need to declare a climate emergency, and it's not about waiting for mayors or governors or presidents to do that, but by people going out on the street and actually saying, you know, business as usual, we can't accept that anymore. So I'm excited to be, for example, a founding member of Extinction Rebellion Denver. But 350.org, we had a direct action yesterday in Chase Bank here in Boulder. We thought we might get arrested, but in the end it didn't happen. But again, more and more people realizing that, well, I guess all this is taking for granted that personal lifestyle, reducing our own carbon footprint, important as that is, that's not sufficient. We have to find ways to address the system, and realizing that the system isn't fixed, it's broken in a way that it's going to absorb dissent, and nothing is really going to happen unless we bring there other developments there. And so I think this is something that Buddhists too need to think about, whether we need to be engaged. And I think this new declaration that Tanisara and Joanna Macy and others have been working on, this declaration of a climate emergency, I think this is really going to be an important part of our response to that. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is I think we all need to be thinking about that as a possible direction.
Great, thanks a lot, David. We're running pretty short. I would love, I saw Anita's hand. Anita, would you like to share, but really just shortly, because I just want to cover a couple of more things. Yeah.
Just building off of what David said, which I really appreciate, just to call your attention to the fact that On One Earth Sangha is not only a call to declare climate emergency, but also information about a webinar and a sort of an outline of calling on people to organize Vesak, I don't know exactly how you say it, Buddha's birthday, Buddha's Enlightenment Day activities in Sangha. So this is meant to be a way to bring this written document into our communities, into our Sanghas, and help people bear witness, which I think this is where Zen Peacemakers practice really comes into play. That the first step is really to bear witness to how difficult this situation is. So those two things, just to go on oneearthsangha.org, you'll see the information about the webinar. This is May 18th, the webinar. And then following that, if people want to, we're going to do this in the Bay Area. I can report back at our next meeting how effective we were in getting people to come out and as a group give each other support to bear witness and perhaps hopefully move on to loving action, whatever that might mean for individuals, whole sanghas, etc.
Great. Thank you, Anita. Yeah, so as we're coming to the close of this call, there's the call to actions that Anita brought up. I know David has a few things lined up. David, would you like to just say a few words about what's up for you that you offer?
Well, yeah, thank you, Rami. Can you? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
A few people have mentioned the Ecodharma book, which just has been released this year, and I want to thank them for that. The subtitle is Buddhist Teachings for the Ecological Crisis. And as far as I know, it's the only sort of full book-length treatment of this. I mean, there are some books on Buddhism and ecology, or Buddhism and nature, and some of them are very good, but actually trying to address the ecological crisis, I think, well, I guess I hope it's just the first of many books that'll be looking at it. But I think it offers a kind of systematic overview. The other thing I want to mention is this new Ecodharma Center that we just started like 2 years ago. It's amazing. We're still trying to sort out, what does it mean? What does it mean to be an Ecodharma Center? But we certainly have a full program of different groups that are using our facilities. So I want to invite everyone, if you're not familiar, please check it out online. If you do a search for Ecodharma, it's Rocky Mountain Ecodharma Retreat Center. For example, I'm doing a 2-week retreat in July, August with Johan Robbins. That's explicitly, talking about Ecodharma. And so we're all in the process of trying to figure out together what that means and what's the best way for us forward here. And I'm also doing other Ecodharma things. People can check out my website. There's also other materials that aren't in the book, relating to not only Ecodharma, but other social justice issues. So I just wanted to make that plug. What did I forget, Rami? I'm sure I forgot something there.
Thank you for being here. David is also, the Ecodharma Center is also an affiliate of Zen Peacemakers International, so it's wonderful to do more, that we develop this relationship, and I personally see this as one way that we do it. So thank you for being on that call. And, just to touch on that, and as we bring this to a close, just to acknowledge that the fact that there are so many countries represented in this meeting really shows not just how prevailing the need is, but it also pulls on our resources. I mean, this is what we're trying to do here in Zen Peacemakers International. We're trying to create an international global movement, literally bring this sense of interconnection around this planet to life through you. So just by holding my awareness with all of you now, I am doing that, and I feel this, and I'm feeling connected, and I hope that's been reverberating for everybody else. And also this sense of this, usually for me, and again, I hope for others, gives rise to solidarity. And solidarity is often when the action comes. Because like Grant said, when my arms feels the other arm, I want to respond. So this is why these calls are so important, just to get connected and get acquainted with each other. And we have these meetings at least once a month. There's another council meeting each month. These are other ways to get connected and just meet other members from around the planet. And please feel free, if there are other things that are coming up after this call that you feel you want to share, feel free to do that on the membership platform. It's really wonderful that you do it out of your own voice. Sometimes people send me things to post, and I always say it's really wonderful that your name is on it, because that's how you get connected. So thank you, Grant. Thank you for David. Thanks for Anita and Carolina and Miko and George and Kathleen and Genjo and Jiko. I would love to I know we're over time. Let's just not give in to the crisis and just take a breath of appreciation and dedicate the energy and the solidarity and the prayer that has come from this meeting to each other, to the planet, to the people who are ravaged by need right now from that, to the galaxy, to Genjo's galaxy, and to the great not knowing, and may our heart keep move us in unknown ways to benefit all of that. Right. Okay, so thank you everyone, and thanks for also staying a bit late. I appreciate that. I'll unmute everybody, and if you just want to say goodbye, please feel free to do that.
And thank you especially to Rami for arranging this, sharing it. You made it possible. Thanks a lot.
Yep.
In addition,
Thank you.
And to the Zen Peacemakers and Bernie.
Bernie.
Indeed. Bernie.
Great.
Blessings all.
Thank you all. Take care.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.